To this appeal, the emperor answered nothing, not a word about the consecration or coronation. He was unwilling to speak about the state of the negotiations or how the Roman service, humiliating for his majesty, had been unconditionally accepted in his name, but he did express himself openly on the subject of the invalid. It would cause great difficulties to perform the ceremony there. Since there was no choir, the bishops and clergy would be ill-placed. All the chosen persons would not be able to find room in the church unless the deputations from the army were absent, which would be wholly indecorous. Then where were the thrones of the emperor and empress to be placed? On the other hand, said the emperor, it is believed that the church at Notre Dame can easily hold 20,000 people. The throne can be placed in the choir. And will there be sufficiently visible? And there is any religious ceremony, the details will be discerned only by the priests and such men whose superior intellects have bestowed upon them a faith equal to that of the 8th century. He ended with the remark that everything seems to point to the suitability of the cathedral. Nevertheless, Segur was to make a final inspection of the invalid so as to ascertain for certain that it was impossible to make the necessary arrangements within it. The emperor also observed that the improvements to the cathedral would be lasting and permanent, while the expenditure on the invalid would be lost. As to the procession, when reduced 30 carriages, the emperor thought should not last more than an hour. Leaving the Tuileries at 8 o'clock in the morning, it would be at Notre Dame by 9. 1 hour for the ceremony, it would reach the Champ de Mars at 11. Without doubt, it would be necessary to pull down several houses near the approach to Notre Dame, but this expense will not be money thrown away, since it will assist in making a great clearing for traffic and ceremonial processions. If after this, the commission composed of the Arch-Chancellor, the Intendant General, the Minister for Public Worship, the Grand Master of the Ceremonies, did not understand that the invalids was rejected, it could only be through a desire to thwart His Majesty. This is carefully refrained from doing. The demolitions around Notre Dame were begun immediately. It was no small matter. It was necessary to pull down the chapel of the ancient chapter, together with all the houses built against it, to open out the square before the great doors as far as the new colonnade of the Hotel Dieu, and to destroy a number of houses behind the church. The house of the choir boys near the city bridge had to be pulled down, the entrance to the archbishop's palace enlarged, and all the walls of the buildings laid bare by the demolition decorated. Even then Fontaine, who was appointed clerk of the works, regretted that he had not time to pull down all the houses belonging to the hospices on the right of the Rue de Parvis. Approaching the church, there was little opposition to fear on the part of the hospices and church authorities, but it was different with the other house owners. Compulsory acquisition for the public benefit had not then been thought of by the authorities. They worked by persuasion. Valuers were appointed, but the minister did not agree to the price they fixed. He appointed others. Then the house owner unreasonably objected. Assuredly, wrote Portalis to the emperor concerning such a case, opposition to this house owner could not be allowed to stop the authorities at a moment when it was necessary to press forward. However, since on such an occasion as Your Majesty's coronation, it is necessary that the citizens should look upon that august ceremony only as a blessing, I sent for the refractory owner, made him see how impertinent was his resistance. I told him that I hoped to obtain from his patriotism and good sense that which I should be unwilling to take by force. He showed himself chastened by my rebuke and promised to obey my orders implicitly. It is to the jurist Portalis that the credit of the invention of expropriation by ministerial persuasion belongs. The work went on by day and night. At night, by the flare of torches. The emperor also wished that the Rue de Rivoli, La Place du Carrousel, and the Quai Bonaparte should be entirely leveled and paved. This was no light task. Least of all, Fontaine entirely changed the aspect of Notre Dame. He took away from within the great ironwork screen of the choir and the 2 altars to the right and left of it. He drew up a plan of platforms and galleries, which would enable the deputations from all over France, at least, to be present at the coronation, though they might see nothing of the ceremony. On the outside, he intended to case a noble church in a pseudo-Gothic covering, to which was attached a portico and an immense porch rising to the height of the separation of the towers. This led to a vast gallery running along the whole length of the church on the side nearest to the Seine, and finally ending in the archbishop's palace. Napoleon had insisted on this corridor, and Fontaine took the opportunity of utilizing an awning which had been made for the King of Churi's visit to Malmaison and Prairial of the year 9, but which unused and unpaid for was still in the hands of the furnisher. The demolitions around Notre Dame were, on the whole, an improvement, except for the destruction of a few valuable historic monuments. But the advantages which Napoleon asserted were to be gained by deserting the Invalides, among others, that the expense of decorating Notre Dame would give permanent results, were mostly illusory. But even if the cost had been more than 700,000 francs, Napoleon would not have thought it too great a sum to spend on the building in which the Pope was about to consecrate him. Already, he was preparing a palace for the reception of His Holiness. At the command, Le Pavillon, the floor was made inhabitable, and the works completed in the Grand Gallery, so that the passage to Le Pavillon from the Musée might be ready for use. The emperor went to see which of the two castles of Compiègne and Fontainebleau would be the most suitable for the first meeting. Compiègne was lacking in everything, but Fontainebleau could be made tolerable by means of a few hasty improvements and a little furniture brought from Paris or borrowed on the spot. The emperor was received as if in a barrack, but the walls and roof were strong and well able to shelter the Pope and the two courts. Such was the state of affairs when Napoleon left Bologna on the 8th of Fructidor, August 26th, for Belgium and the Rhenish departments. If the coronation was to take place on the 18th of Brumaire, November 9th, there were scarcely 2.5 months left. The preparations went on in haste, though no certainty was felt as to who was to be the consecrator. The dresses, as regulated by the decree, were made under the superintendence of Isabelle. Ségur gave the orders, and Regnault de Saint-Jean d'Angely his advice. This last personage was not wanted, and his capacity was doubtful. By naming a man Councillor of State wrote Denon to the emperor, you make him a great personage, but all your omnipotence cannot make him a man of taste. Denon had already designed the great seal of the state and aggrieved that he proposed to the emperor to design a dress for him which should be both dignified and magnificent, but he did not succeed in ousting Vergniaud, who, constrained by a sense of his own importance to keep within his house, sent instructions to the embroiderers, costumiers, tailors, and shoemakers, which were apparently little heeded, since he wrote, these work people have a great idea of their own importance just at present, and are very little disposed to perform their duties or to keep their places. This is almost equal to the remarks of Portalis to the house owner in the cathedral square, and shows that a feeling of arrogance had quickly arisen among the new aristocracy of the empire. Neither costumier, embroiderer, nor tailor knew whom actually to obey, for besides Isabelle, Regnault, Ségur, and Denon, Monsieur Rumza, the first chamberlain, busied himself in the matter in his capacity of keeper of the wardrobe. It was he who, of his own accord, bade the designers and embroiderers to the details of their work. Nevertheless, progress was made, and there was some likelihood of the things being got ready in time. In the master of the horses department, the matter was easier. Caulaincourt had reckoned that he would need 140 new horses, 8 of which were to be a team of light bays for the Empress carriage, and 8 dapple gray for that of the Empress, the equipment only of a sovereign. Having obtained them, he prepared deliveries and urged on the coach builders. For 40 carriages were necessary. The Emperor's coach was ordered from Guillotine, according to the Precier and Fontaine's design, but the design was thought too costly, and for economy's sake, the richness and magnificence of it was a good deal curtailed, so that the final cost was 114,000 francs. The Grand Chamberlain, churchman as he had been, felt certain of the Pope's arrival and arranged accordingly. The Grand Marshal, accustomed to the unexpected and knowing how to act independently of his chief, was astonished at nothing and ready for anything, but the uncertainty continued to be most vexatious for the Grand Master of the ceremony. Since all the arrangements at Notre Dame depended on the coming of the Pope, the matter was only settled on the 20th of September. He had 48 days in which to get everything ready. There were the thrones to be prepared, one of which, approached by some perpendicular steps, occupied the whole end of the nave. There were hangings, for all the walls were to be embroidered or painted with the arms and insignia of the empire. There were carpets of blue velvet, on which golden bees had been powdered profusely, despite Denon and Ségur. The curtains shutting off the choir and extending along the galleries were draped in immense folds and hid the pillars, so that the glorious building of stone was entirely draped in tinsel and frippery. Then there were the vessels for this service, which were demanded by the Abbé d'Astor, canon of Notre Dame, came for his customary at the coronation of kings, he said, to have everything new. He asked for not only a monstrous 2 crosses, 2 censers, 2 book covers, a ciborium, a holy water vessel, an offertory plate, 2 other vessels, a chalice, 2 pairs of vases for oil, and a bowl to match the vases, but also 16 copes in cloth of gold, with 8 tunics, 2 chasubles, a stole, 2 maniples, a lectionary, and a pastoral stole, as well as for 2,425 francs for church linen and the complete equipment of the staff of Notre Dame, consisting of 4 ushers, 12 choir boys, and under deacon of the mass, a large false stool for his holiness, with cloth cushions embroidered with silk, a smaller false stool of iron, with the cushion covered with cloth of silver, silk with a white ground and gold embroidery, another false stool without drapery, carpets for the steps of the altar and the pavement and steps of the sanctuary, a cloth of special kind for the altar, and 7 candlesticks, the 7th of which was to stand behind the cross, 7 other candlesticks for the acolytes, 8 others for the entrance of the choir, also some credences, some high-backed benches with 2 steps, others with 1 and no step, others without any backs, and on these benches stuffs of certain colors and proportions, also pulpits, tables, and yet more tables. At this moment, it was enough to cause a man to lose heart. Prodigies of labor were required, and they were forthcoming.